All right, my friends, we are coming into the 15th episode of Year of the Projects, and this is the last of the triple whammy under the person's noun. So we are going to be discussing the macro to micro arguments surrounding good and evil, health and wealth, shared values, and global concerns, and how, in social and environmental justice, these are coming to an end as literacy skyrockets and resolve forms at a variety of important geopolitical levels. This is mostly just me concluding the last two episodes in which I argued that we are much further along than it currently feels that we are, and we're also going in a much more positive direction than it currently feels that we are. And this is, again, sort of taking a zoomed out, more historic view of all of humanity within the context of our entire species' history. But it is important to keep that perspective, especially when talking about global socio-political behaviors, because global interrelating, national interrelating, does have a lot of historical context that needs to be understood in the same way that you need to understand your friend's history in order to understand, the way that they're behaving right now, or the way that they're feeling, more importantly. So, all of that in mind, wow, the macro to micro arguments surrounding good and evil, health and wealth, shared values, and global concerns. I am making a really big argument here. I'm saying that we're kind of done talking about it. And I made that argument in the last two, specifically about Nazism. We've all agreed that's not good. We can't tolerate hate at that level. We can't, survive as a species in a general sense if certain groups of us go around rounding up other groups of us for, systemic complete annihilation and slaughter, right? Or even just oppression, even just oppression, or intentionally creating tiered caste systems, right? And I know there is, or there would be, I would assume there would be a certain amount of, not pessimism, that's not the right word. What's the word I'm looking for? It's a little bit condescension. It's a little bit pessimism. Jaded. Yeah, jaded is what I'm looking for. There's definitely a super valid jaded perspective that I hear in my mind coming at me from, honestly, India, but just more ancient cultures who have fought the caste system, class system, oppression of different groups because of who they are as groups, for much longer than I have been alive, obviously, but much longer than my country has been alive, much longer than any of my identities have really been alive. So, to a certain extent, I understand that I'm speaking into a room with plenty of reasons to be jaded, and not a lot of reasons to necessarily trust or have faith in the young whippersnapper and all. But I'm also well aware that jaded folk actually need to be re-inspired with hope. That's kind of the whole deal with jadedism. You don't want to remain jaded, no matter how much we like Jade the Stone. You don't want to remain jaded in life, right? It does not leave a whole lot of room for joy or a whole lot of capacity for wonder, a whole lot of space for awe. And awe, joy, and wonder are some of the best parts of being alive and of being conscious people. So obviously we want to move away from this jaded perspective of like, oh, there will always be caste or class systems, there will always be people who want to oppress others for who they are, there will always be hate in this sense. And I really made strong arguments, I feel, in the last 2 episodes with a future-oriented approach, to the tune of we are actually coming to an end with that. I do think that our capacity to speak at the rates in which we can speak to one another with the speed and the level of nuance and sophistication we can add to our communications in a global way across distance, space, and time, but also across language barriers, cultural barriers, all sorts of other barriers. We really are hastening an end of that particular type of worldview. And I'm not saying it couldn't ever be resurrected. I'm not saying it won't ever come back to bite us in the ass in another several thousand years of humanity's existence. Please, God, allow us to continue to exist. I want to see the rest of the universe. I would really love that. I think all of creation is really beautiful, and I would just love to continue seeing and experiencing more of it. And I think most of us agree. And anybody who's like mad or hurt or pissed off or feeling pessimistic or disagreeable by nature or whatever is honestly just reacting to how much they love the world and how bitterly disappointed they are in not being able to experience it with as much freedom or as much joy or as much time or as much capacity to share the awe of that experience. And that's an understandable bitterness, but I really do think that that's mostly where those things come from, is that the default is it's love. This default is joy in existence, and the bitterness comes from not being able or being denied access to all of the different ways in which we can experience pleasure, joy, awe, wonder, inspiration, etc. And so thinking about good and evil, health and wealth, and shared values, we have been long form elaborating these concepts to ourselves as a species across cultures, across continents. And we've come up with relatively the same answers, which is so funny, like throughout all of time, all of our living existence as creatures, we have more or less in completely isolated environments, or seemingly isolated but not psychically isolated, I would argue, environments, we have come up with a lot of the same arguments surrounding good and evil, health and wealth, and shared values, and they just look somewhat different based on cultural history and what is the word? Oh, environment. Yeah, our physical environment dictates so much of our culture and our practices. So these things are all obviously interrelated, but interestingly, we have come to a certain amount of unanimous agreements surrounding what these things entail. We have a general agreement about what good is. We have a general agreement about what evil is. We think love is pretty good. We think love can sometimes be used towards evil ends, or yeah, never mind, I'm not getting into the details of this. We have certain agreements on health. We haven't fully agreed on wealth, but I feel like we're winding up that argument on whether or not the rampant hoarding of resources should really be allowed. I think that one's kind of on its way out, right? Like we have some general opinions on these things. And health, gosh, I mean, let's just start with exercise, daily exercise, lots of water, eating well, eating nutritiously, right? Like those are some basics that we can all agree on. You should probably eat within your ecological environment's niche, right? Just to keep from hurting other people's ecological environments. And by people, I also mean like other species. Like, can we treat other species that aren't us as though they are kind of people as well? You know, as in deserving of some respect and understanding of their place in the world and the way that they impact us. And the way that we impact them. But yeah, I do feel that we are coming to some agreements on these things, and that some shared values are starting to arise out of these long-form elaborations of discussion surrounding these topics. When I say discussion, you know, I don't just mean like sitting around talking about it. I don't even mean singing about it. I don't even mean acting it out in movies, shows, plays, etc. I also mean acting it out in the world, in actual physical reality, in the wars that we are having. I think the modern day warfare that is currently going on, to me at least, seems so loud in the messages they are sending that I'm almost afraid to distill them into just average words, right? And for understandable reasons. These are pretty serious geopolitical activities, and I want to be conscious of that. But we are having these discussions all the time, and I think it's worth the individual person really considering themselves opting in, self-categorizing as being involved in those discussions. I think that's one of the hardest things for people who are forced to be spectators, right? You're forced to be a consumer rather than a producer of this media. If you want to get involved with war, your choices as an average American citizen is going to be to sign up for the military. Or possibly to get into law and to study law and history and to become a policymaker at some level, or otherwise get into government or participate in the commentary surrounding the war in a way where your voice can be heard. Maybe that even just means being in the entertainment industry, sure. I guess there's a lot of avenues to feel like you're participating, but none of them really seem accessible to the average laborer. And again, this country runs on the average laborer, especially the invisible laborers, the day laborers, the feminine laborers, the slave laborers, all of that. All of those folk are the ones that are really guiding this place, and making it possible to live here. And so at that level, and thinking within the context of like the broader geopolitical sphere, mentally, cognitively, emotionally opting into these discussions as though you are an active participant who can have a real world impact is actually really important. I don't want to necessarily say that if all of the prisoners in prison were to think really, really hard about something, and it was all the same thing that they were thinking about, and it was all like going to have a real world impact. I'm not going to say that they could like telekinetically have that impact, because I think there's something in the concrete that surrounds their prison cells that makes that unlikely. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that it's not that cut and dried, but I also wouldn't like say that you shouldn't try doing that. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing more solidarity in prison populations, and also less Nazis, less white supremacists, because that's pretty fucked up, gang. But like solidarity across the populations, just as far as like impacting the real world, and feeling yourself capable of impacting the real world, feeling yourself as having power, having the capacity to reach out and touch the world with your mind, that is real, and it's already happening, I think. So I would encourage everyone to put a little bit more weight on that, and perhaps in the opposite, or along the opposite isn't the right word, but maybe there's some kind of counterbalance word that I want to use, but along a different vein, all of those who are free non-prisoners, which is everyone else, please think of prisoners as being impactful and real world capable of impacting your life. Give them the weight that they deserve to have in the world. At the very least, give them the weight of real humanity, because it is actually our perception of their existence as being less than, somehow demoted from humanity, somehow kicked out of humanity, that is actually keeping them from impacting our systems and our experiences, and even their own living experiences, as positivistically and as much as they deserve to be able to impact their own experience. So that being said, I also, like there are some pretty gnarly bad people in prison that like I don't necessarily want impacting my world to that extent, but I'm gonna risk it. Like, I think overall it's prison that's bad more than the people who are in it. It's not an actual way to rehabilitate anybody. You're not healing anyone, you're not helping anybody by locking them up, by isolating them from society, by encouraging their most brutal, violent behaviors. There's nothing good in that. All you're doing is creating an animalistic workforce, which is exactly the point of the prison industrial complex. They are making our license plates for $1.10 a day, or some atrociously underpaid amount. Pay prisoners the minimum wage, okay? Just do it, and you'll ruin the industry. You'll ruin the whole fucking industry, and you should. It deserves to be ruined. Not every industry deserves to exist, and that one definitely does not deserve to exist. So there's that for you. But shared values, yeah, health and wealth, good and evil. What is good and evil? What is healthy? What is wealthy? I think a lot of people are on the movement for health is wealth, which I love, because it's just so true. And if you seek health, you will get wealth, pretty much. It's just they are interrelated, but health comes first. So, sorry, my brain tickles right now. Oh my god, I want to itch it. I can't reach inside my own cranium, unfortunately. Or fortunately. Probably fortunately, I would have interrupted a lot of thoughts if I had done that. But this is known stuff that can be documented. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but I do want to continue to reiterate that this is already happening, that these things are moving forward, that this momentum is there, that positivistically speaking, and not even with the intention of being overly positive, but just with the perspective of like, we have to actually intentionally look at positive things, because our mind will default to negative things, because that's how evolutionarily wise we have protected ourselves in the past. You gotta handle the threat before you can enjoy the joy or whatever. But at this point, it's kind of tripping us up as a species, because we've evolved, we've adapted, we've gotten pretty good at handling threats, but we actually haven't gotten very good at thinking about the positives. So it has to be done with a certain amount of intentionality, a certain amount of purpose behind it, and that's what positivism is. That's what positivistic mindsets are, is this intentional reorienting and re-acknowledging the positive side of things, because otherwise the only thing we'll see is negative. But of course everything has a little bit of both in it, otherwise we wouldn't have free will. And I'm going to keep bringing it back to free will like that, because I think it's a very clear and obvious relation and connection, but whatever. Oh my god, brain, you tickle. So yeah, literacy skyrockets and resolve forms at a variety of important geopolitical levels. Wow, I am just fucking such a talker, aren't I? I'm gonna get in trouble someday. Yeah, we're really fucking literate about this, honestly, and I know that I painted a really grim picture of the majority of Americans, in the sense that like they aren't engaged, they aren't involved, they view the world through this authoritarian lens of like the man coming down upon them and whatever. But actually, I think that was really doom and gloom of me. I think there is a more positive side of it that I wasn't illuminating at the time or noticing at the time. And really, there is this entire world of self-actualized and intrinsically motivated Americans who are actively working towards the health and wealth of both themselves and their communities. And it does deserve a shout out. It deserves some acknowledgement. And I would also say that it's originating from minority groups. It is coming from those who have been the most systemically oppressed. It's coming from those who've been the most systemically experiencing violence against them and their personhood, their bodies, and who they are as creatures in this world, because that oppression has led to a need to be creative about solutions, and that creative solutionism is really what's going to save us. It is the people who have been the most oppressed who are going to be able to do the most best resistance in oppression, because they are the most familiar with their oppressors' behaviors. And yeah, I mean, that's just true. So let's remember that. Let's remember that all of the best things from the cultural and love revolutions that came out of those things, you know, joy, love, deepening intimacy between others, between people, better solidarity between groups, and also like just real world, real life things. I don't know if I should say this, but one thing that I just love that came out very directly from those movements in the more privileged like communities, the white people basically, is they went into real estate like ship, like super hard. They were like, this redlining, this gerrymandering, all of this bullshit is so fucked up. I'm gonna become a property person. I'm gonna be somebody who does property stuff. And they did it like really aggressively, like internationally speaking. Go ahead, look it up. You can't look it up because nobody's documenting this, but I noticed it, and I know you noticed it because it's there and it's happening. So anyway, the positive stuff, it's not always going to be noticed. It's not always going to be documented. It's not always going to be written down, because actually it might be dangerous to write that kind of thing down. You might be threatening the resistance by doing so. Sometimes even saying stuff, you know, I really worry that I'm undermining people. I really don't want to say, I don't want to point out some of the positive stuff that people are doing, because I'm like, ooh, it might be too soon to point it out. It could direct the attention of the ops, and then they could get crushed, and I don't want that. you know? So we have to be careful about what we're talking about. And I know that you know this, I know that everybody kind of knows this, but it also lends this incredibly oppressive experience of like, only the negative is allowed to be super real. And that makes it so hard to feel like the progress is really happening, and that makes it hard to continue to invest in the progress. So we do have to participate actively in a certain amount of reassurance within ourselves, within our solidarity networks, within our affinity groups, within our interpersonal relationships, just in consistently reiterating the good that we see in the world. And one of the best ways to do that, one of the safest ways to do that, is the public institutions that already exist. They're bold-faced doing it. It is out there. It is ready to go. It is saying aggressively, I'm down to stand in the way. One of those things, I'm going to plug the ACLU right now. The American Civil Liberties Union has always been one of my favorites, who've been willing to just like absolutely do that in the most bald-faced way. I know they are limited in their ability to move because of how official they have chosen to be, but it is institutions like that and people like that who do end up helping to hold the line or to create more space for all of the underground or more delicate movements of progress and of resistance to really have the impact that it has. So keep in mind all of that that's going on. There's no good thing that could be a bad thing. It's all good. It's all good stuff. They're all good together. And this is partially me just like talking to me, because earlier last summer I was like really pissed at the ACLU for no reason, just because like they weren't doing enough, because my bitter hurt heart was bitter and hurt, you know, and I'm sure that they were feeling it, not necessarily from me, but I'm sure that they get that, right? Because it doesn't feel like enough. It never feels like enough. It never will. And if you put yourself out there as like the official, you know, the face of that movement, of that part of the movement, of that section of the movement, of that aspect of resistance, if you really set yourself up to be the face of that, you are going to feel that way. You are going to feel like it's not enough, that what you're doing is never going to be enough, that maybe even that you're like giving in, right? Like you're using the master's tools to remake the house, and it's just going to end up being the same fucking house, and it'll just perpetuate the inequality rather than liberate people. And that is just the nightmare of anyone working in liberation. And so yeah, of course, yeah, it's scary stuff, but no, the institutions that are being created in resistance, in opposition to oppressive regimes, are still good institutions. They help create space. They help create room for even more progress. So if you're feeling bitter towards any of the good guys, I get it, I understand, but keep in mind there are so many good guys, and we are all working together, guys and gals, sorry gals, always doing that, but we are all working together towards a better future. And so this idea of global concerns for social and environmental justice coming to an end as literacy skyrockets. I mean, it really is skyrocketing, and I will argue that resolve is forming across the different layers of what you could consider the caste system. And we're going to just call it the caste system because we're going to go based on economy, because income inequality is the most pressing concern as far as lack of access to resources for wellness, right? And wellness and health are a integral part of a future that honors humanity's place, like true place within our ecological environment. That health is going to direct everything we do surrounding food, water, the reallocation of resources, etc. But what's interesting is that we're seeing resolve happening in a, I want to say in a vertical way across these different caste systems that have been implemented through, income brackets, essentially. We can call them tax brackets in America. That works just fine. Um, and you're seeing it form across all of the layers, through all of the layers, all the way down. And that's fucking cool. That's really, really cool to see that kind of solidarity. That's really unprecedented, I would even argue, to see the kind of solidarity that we're seeing in America right now across the income divides. And, I'm not talking about billionaires or trillionaires because, yeah, they exist now too. But everybody under that, the millionaires are looking at the billionaires going, oh, okay, that's a little much. And they're looking at the people below them going, this isn't okay. This just isn't okay. And that's huge. That's a big step forward. And not all of them, obviously. There's still self-entitled, self-righteous, self-involved people in the world. They are always going to exist, and their horribleness is going to be amplified by their relative power. So when they have more wealth, they have more power to influence the world. Yeah, they're going to seem even more horrible, but don't let these outsized perceptions of these symbols of income cloud the issue when it comes to the different layers of income inequality in America and the solidarity that really is existing between them. It really is. You see it in the art, you see it in the culture, you see it across all of our different means of interpersonally communicating. And I would argue you really see it the most in anonymous spaces, in environments like the internet, where you're able to speak without knowing who has money or does not have money. Anonymity is a area of freedom in interpersonal relating that has been unprecedented and has honestly, what I would super argue, has changed the entire shape of our species' progress and rapidly increased it towards a more positive, healthier future for everyone. And so that anonymity really needs to be protected. Net neutrality really needs to come back hardcore. I think America is the best one to lead the way on it, to be quite honest. I really don't think the EU is doing the best job with their laws. No offense, EU. I think you're doing some really interesting things with your internet laws, but I don't think they're what I would do. I just learned that the UK is requiring people to submit IDs in order to sign into Discord, which is okay. So those sorts of things are not the solution. If you want to eradicate child sexual abuse, you're not going to do it by preventing children from hanging out on Discord. That's fucking stupid. I gotta get a hold of myself. Because we all know the answer. We all know it. We all know what it is. We all know that it's an economy. And if it's an economy, that means people are profiting off of it. And if people are profiting off of it, that means people could fucking die. But anyway, I did say I would not advocate violence. And I'm totally not advocating for that. But anyway, we are seeing a rise in literacy in the general population that is allowing us to be able to more specifically articulate what it is we think we need as communities in small ways, in big ways, and also to be able to get it. The sharing of resources among people in lower income brackets has risen. The barter and trade economy is coming back, and that's great. That's awesome. That is resistance. Time banking is another one that I'm seeing kind of resurge. And there are a lot of different ways to resist. I know, let's see. Stop being afraid of the government, first of all. Like, Americans, what the fuck? Really? Like, you're just so mad at the man, you can't, like, take a hold of your own government and actually use it for your own benefit? What the fuck? I mean, California is doing it. Not to brag about my own state, but oh my god, did they take that legal system by the horns and fucking ride that shit. Yeah, mixed metaphor, but it's going pretty well. The things that California is doing at a state legislation sort of level is beautiful. It's one reason I am happy to live here. It's one reason I would not move if I was asked to. I'm really like a very happy transplant, love the soil, super stoked to be here. And it drew me here in the first place, right? It was their environmental and social justice platforms in a public policy sort of way that drew me here, because I knew it meant that the little people were going to be happier. And I'm a little person. Like, I wanted to be happier. I wanted to live in a place that said food should be a human right. I want to live in a place that gives social support and social programs as a human right against a system of inequality, against an oppressive regime that actively oppresses some more than others, right? I'll never forget, like, going back to redlining and gerrymandering and like the ways in which Black and Indigenous people especially, but any non-white person has been like herded or corralled into certain areas in cities, right? Like, not ghettos even, but although yes, those too, those also, tenement housing, like Irish people too, way back in the day, right? Like, the definition of white has changed, and it wasn't even way back in the day. We're only 200 years old as a country. Like, this is only a few generations of like experience, right? 4 at the most. People live to like 100 now, okay? We have to change the scale of our perceptions. For some reason, plenty of us are still living within the paradigm of humans dying at 30, and that's just medieval. It's fucking medieval. It's feudalism. Yes, they used to die at like 38. That 30 used to be fucking old. It's true, it did happen, but that's just not the case anymore. Please grow up and use a different time paradigm for your human lifespan expectancy. Or are you just fucking afraid that you're gonna do a bad job at surviving? Fucking get over yourself. God damn it. But anyway, yeah, God, where was I going? I got all mad giving somebody a lecture. Who even knows who that was for? Oh yeah, being herded like cattle. Yeah, so every non-privileged person throughout American history, mostly non-whites, although some whites have been included, like light-skinned people, right? The definition of white or even black or any of these races having changed phenomenally throughout time, literally just to continue protecting wealth and property. It's never not been about that. It has never not been about that. So outside of all that, I mean, not outside of all that, but because, wait, where was I going? Oh yeah, so this redlining, gerrymandering, like this policy level herding of folk, and ensuring a certain separationism in where people live, right, has the embodied physical impact of killing people, mostly because the people who get forced to live in the place that the privileged folk don't want to live in are going to be living in environments that are less suitable for human habitation. Whether that means they're being cramped into smaller spaces where disease is going to be more likely to be rampant, or harder to control, whether they're being forced to live in places with less sanitation infrastructure, or poor sanitation infrastructure, maybe poor, like lead housing, for example. Whether they're being forced to live in places that are near to plants or production or industry that puts pollution out into the air or into the water. No matter what, it's an active and intentional murder or slaughter of those you consider to be less than human or less than you. And that has been the violence of oppression in America and around the world. This has been a continued thing since before British colonialism, but British colonialism really did turn slavery into an industry. They really did, and so did Spanish colonialism to a lesser extent. So did, or should I say lesser extent, all of South America might fucking disagree, right? South and Middle America. So these are pretty serious things. And again, the industry of selling human bodies. Children's bodies, yeah, I know I've said that one, but like human bodies in general is what is justifying, or what has historically justified, the treating of others as less than human, less than oneself, because you cannot sell and trade and buy people without thinking of them as being less than you. Not unless you're also sellable, tradable, and buyable yourself, in which case that's just kink. Yeah, so anyone who is like blind to this machination of the mechanism of oppression at this point is willfully blind. Like, it's Googleable. Seriously, search Bacon's Rebellion. I swear to God, unpacking the white knapsack. I know I've talked about this before, but we've documented this. People have painstakingly documented this. People have risked their lives to document this. And it's an industry that can and needs to end if we are going to move on into the future. The selling of slaves, the othering of people, the demeaning of their personhood, the justification, the justifying of placing them in positions as less than you in real space, in physical, environmental space, but also in cyberspace, okay? Let's talk about the way algorithms are biased. Everything about our internet infrastructure reflects our living reality as people, and our living reality as people is not super, like, it's not great right now. I almost said kosher, but it's not great right now, right? Like, we are not awesome in a culturally inclusive kind of way, or in like even a humanity inclusive kind of way. We are not acknowledging one another's humanity. We're not acknowledging the divine in one another. There is no namaste up in here. This is fucked up shit, and it continues to be reflected in our digital environments. It's reflected in our algorithms. The bias is built in, and this is something that scholars have already been commenting on. This is something people are already discussing. There is positive movement towards and away from this situation, like positive movement towards it as in like aggressive movement to dismantle it, positive movement away from it as in moving into a world where this is not the reality. But it takes everyone being involved in that, and that starts with people thinking about it. It starts with people becoming more literate, it starts with people becoming more aware, and it starts with people being more conscious of themselves and the way that they are interacting with the world, both in physical space and in cyberspace. So one of the things that I think about a lot when it comes to restructuring society, and I'm just going to leave you with this because it's such a positive note and it's really cool, and I'm totally stealing it from a book I read, but one of the coolest, like, images that I hold in my heart that I read once and I internalized and I said, yes, okay, it's possible, we can have that world, was a reimagining of the physical layout or structure of human habitation. And that's it's a challenging one to do. It was challenging for the author who did it, and it's challenging to do in a general sense because people don't want to be moved, and we are pretty territorial. we like once we decide this is our spot, this is our home, this is our place, we don't want to move. Even if it's bad for us, even if we live in a place that is, experiencing pollution from nearby factories or has inadequate sanitation. If we decide that's our place, it's our spot. That, like, you can't, like, this is my home, these are my people, this is my house, I'm not leaving this place. And that is, like, I've always thought of it as a really beautiful thing, to be honest. It's something that makes me feel grounded, it makes me feel solidarity, it makes me feel human to acknowledge this as a general sense that it's something that we all do, but also it makes me feel human in the sense that I feel entitled to do the same. I also want a place that's mine. I also want to stay in one spot and be like, this is my home. Which is funny because, I generally go by nomad. People know me as a nomad. They know I'm like totally a travel lady. But at the same time, I really love having roots. I think it's important. And I think we all fare better when we are rooted, and especially if we're rooted in community with others, in happy, healthy gardens, we really fucking thrive. And so this idea of restructuring society, and genuinely like doing massive, massive upheavals in where people are located, right? Like I remember feeling that when I was thinking about people living closer to water, like just on coastal regions, and thinking about rising sea levels coming from a place that is landlocked, right? I come from Colorado initially, and I've never lived near the ocean, never lived near large bodies of water in general. My closest relation to water is rivers, but living in a place like that and hearing about rising sea levels, learning about it from an environmentalist standpoint, and realizing that there are like a significant amount of people who are just going to lose their homes. Like they're just going to lose their homes. If this continues unabated, they will be washed away from their roots. And I've thought about that for a long, long time. And what's interesting is that some of the strategies for combating rising sea levels is actually to plant trees and shrubbery in the sort of more sandy soil on coastal regions as a means of reinforcing the ground, and to helping combat the rising sea levels is actually just to plant more growth. And so maybe the answer is not all of the coastal region peoples need to leave the coast necessarily, although I do think to a certain extent they will have to retreat slowly, and I bet they are planning on it, or they're gonna just find a way to live on the water, which is also totally them. I say them like I don't live there now. I'm a coastal person now. Yeah, it's us. It's me. But it's also something that... Wait, where was I going with this? Oh, right, okay. There are going to be places that will, like, no matter what you do, need to be redistributed, like, need to be reorganized, need to be rebuilt. There are cities that are going to need to be rebuilt, and I'm not talking about Italy necessarily, although I kind of am. And I'm not necessarily saying that we have to do it in the super rigid way that I'm about to suggest to you, but in a theme, the hexagon is a really great pattern. Like, you can be a bee, but also a human in your city. And now I know this seems kind of out there, but I think the architects and the engineers who enjoy listening to me are already thinking or buzzing with the concept, or maybe have encountered it before, in the sense that the hexagon is a really stable structure, it's a really wonderful pattern, and it lends itself to equality. It lends itself to a certain amount of even-handedness in the distribution of where people live and where they work, and it also helps create a centralized node for the industry that is most vital to the region, or that is most vital to the community. For example, waste reclamation, or other areas like education, growth, farming, herding. Yeah, so there is going to be a need to redistribute our populations across more environmentally sustainable means, and that is going to create an opportunity to redistribute people across more socially equitable means as well, and to ensure that people are really living in places where they can thrive equally, right? That nobody is being intentionally herded into the worst places, because yeah, that should never happen. And one of the best ways to ensure that that doesn't happen is to build a society, build infrastructure in such a way, which we can now do with our technology. We couldn't do it before, but we can do it now. Build the infrastructure in such a way that there is no worst place, that in a horizontal way, everything is being attended to, seen to, and functioning within its niche in the larger whole of things, in a way where the badness, the pollution aspects, the potentially unsanitary conditions of it just simply don't exist. First of all, living with subpar sanitation shouldn't exist in the first place. That's not acceptable. We have the technology, we have the resources, we have the capacity to ensure a certain level of sanitation in every community. That's just ridiculous to assume that we don't. But along every other line of industry, we have the capacity for renewable and for more environmentally sustainable practices that could ensure this society no longer has, or that city, that community, that town, the hamlet, the village, they no longer have an area that's the worst part. And I'm gonna finish with just one last thought here, is that if you don't have slums, where the fuck are you gonna do all the bad shit that we all pretend we don't like doing, but we actually do like doing, such as gambling and sex work? And I'm gonna argue again, once again, oh my fucking god, take all the things that you love about the slums, take all the things that you love about all the bad shit, and make it, acceptable, make it publicly, not encouraged, but publicly enveloped. Put it in its spot. Be like, this is the place where you go if you wanna pay for sex. It's great. They're really skilled. They have expertise in the matter. And they also have healthcare, they also probably aren't going to give you an STI because they received proper STI treatment and care if it happens, and also preventative care and education to ensure that it's less likely, right? That's the whole fucking point of public health. That's the entire point of increasing our capacity to create healthy communities and healthy environments. And so when you stigmatize something, when you shame it, when you say that it shouldn't exist, when you put it on the outskirts of a community, of a society, you leave it in the slums, you leave it on the docks, you leave it somewhere else, those things are going to continue causing your community harm until it gets treated as a part of the community. Bring it into the sphere of the family in a way that makes sense, and it will be okay. People are afraid of doing that to make sex work like a family thing, literally because of pedophilia. I'm telling you, it's because people are profiting off of child prostitution, and nobody wants to address child prostitution. They just want to call all prostitution bad, I'm gonna keep going off about this because it's really fucking true and I'm really fucking tired of it not being addressed, so you're gonna hear it a lot. But anyway, I'm gonna leave you with this. I think we managed the macro to micro argument surrounding good and evil, health and wealth, shared values and global concerns in social and environmental justice, and how they're coming to an end as literacy skyrockets and resolve forms at a variety of important geopolitical levels. I really do feel that this is a horizontal thing across caste systems. We are all kind of coming to the same conclusions in different ways, but actually kind of at the same rate now, thanks to the internet, and we should definitely be protecting anonymity online because it has been a huge motivator in this happening in the first place. Cozy out.